All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Brooke, and I'm the marketing coordinator here at Driven Data. I just wanted to say welcome to everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We have some really interesting topics to cover, and we hope that you guys leave here today learning something new. So at this time, I would like to introduce our Chief Customer Officer, Zach Hendricks, who will talk a little bit more about what we'll be discussing here today.
Thanks, Brooke. Good morning and good afternoon to those of you who are located in the future. Today's webinar is about trends that are driving dealerships across the nation. Today's discussion is exclusively for the great folks that support the automotive industry. So welcome. If you're looking for your kid's first day of Zoom school class or the Bitcoin Moonshot meeting, you're probably in the wrong room. But jokes aside, I'd like to take a moment to thank the Driven Data employees and our dealer partners. We're thrilled to get to partner with a lot of the most progressive dealers across the nation. And today's discussion will speak to the empirical data that we're seeing and recommendations on how to execute based on those opportunities. For those of you that are new to Driven Data, welcome. I'd encourage you to reach out to us via our website or on social media or directly with a team member to learn more about how we might fit together in the future. We've got a full agenda on our plate today, so I want to go ahead and get started. I'm the hype man today, so I'm proud to introduce two automotive veterans. Today, you'll hear from our founder and CEO, Jon Berna, and our Director of Product and Partnerships, Mike DeCecco. One last housekeeping item before we begin. We're going to distribute a follow-up asset after this presentation, but please feel free to take notes. In addition, we're going to have some time for questions at the end or near the end of each section. If you have a question, we'd encourage you to use the chat functionality located in the bottom of the Zoom menu bar. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming our founder and CEO, Jon Berna.
Thank you, Zach, and thank you everybody for joining today. This presentation is one that we've been working on over the past couple months, and really it started just purely on a discovery of what's happening in the industry and how do we best align our products and services with the industry. We've supported dealerships with analytics since the very beginning of Driven Data's history. So for those of you that don't know, we started as an integration company, integrating with every CRM and DMS and inventory management platform, as well as marketing and auto. Then we moved into analytics. After that, we moved into audiences and supporting dealerships with first-party data. And then we actually built our own marketing platform at the end. And so really, if you kind of go back to the origin of what we did, it was always on a pure mission of what's happening in dealerships and how can we best, leverage analytics to support, better decision making. And so when you think about like what powers that platform and the analytics, we have actually about 36 million data points on average per dealership. And this covers the gambit of sales, service, inventory, website, as well as even marketing analytics. So we really cover everything. And what's unique about how we've done this is we've tied all these together in a universal architecture. So regardless of which platform dealerships use, we standardize across all of them, whether it's CRM, DMS, inventory, website, marketing partner, whatever. And so by doing that and having that kind of as the foundation of what we do, it enables us to have really this unique perch to see what's happening inside of dealerships. And today, I'm going to share with you a ton of metrics. It's going to be overwhelming, but I have to get it out of my head. We have to share this with you all. And I think what you're going to find is a lot of the gut or what you're seeing at maybe different perspectives will be validated today. In some cases, you're going to find things that are very surprising. In other cases, you're going to be like, yeah, duh, inventory's down, right? So today we're going to cover kind of the ripple effects of everything and what dealerships can do to, better prepare themselves for this coming, 3 to 6 months, which we think is critical. So, to really kind of kick things off, every dealership going into this year had a plan. And what happened was that plan got thrown out with inventory the way that it is. And every dealership had to break down and rebuild their processes from top to bottom. And this really obviously started last year, but it's obviously changed considerably this year. And so the plan versus the process and what dealerships have had to do to be nimble has been quite remarkable. And it's been really, really encouraging to watch how adaptive these businesses can behave. So today we're going to talk about our perspective on what that change has been and what that changes in the data. And we're going to cover everything from inventory, website metrics, leads, sales and service metrics, ad spend and some of the ad metrics. And then obviously the last big thing in the reveal is going to be loyalty. We're going to talk about what's happened to dealership loyalty in their customer bases over this past year, even going back well into prior years. So obviously the elephant in the room is inventory, right? And so when you think about what's the driver of all of this, obviously it's new car supply of inventory. So the average dealership on our platform has 41 cars in stock as of today. In June, that was 95. And if you go back to last year, that average is about 210. So we're significantly down. Everybody's become a used car dealership, more so in every way possible. And genuinely, we've seen a lot of remission of digital retailing practices. We've seen a whole host of behavioral changes in dealerships, which we're going to kind of touch on today. But inventory is the obvious, cause for so many of these things. The average days that it takes for a car to sell is at the all-time low for new at 31 days. For used, it's plateaued over the last 4 months, but is now at 41. So we started to see used tick up a little bit. We predicted this, and our customers know this. We definitely shared this insight a few months ago. As used car supply started to increase, we predicted that the used car, lead days to sale would increase, and it has, but it's generally pretty plateaued at around 41. When you look at trade-in percentages, this is something that I think all dealerships have been really focusing on. We've been focusing on it from a marketing perspective, but I think dealerships just really at the point of sale, choosing customers that have trades. This has led to an all-time high of used car customers, people that are buying a used car, trading in a used car, trading in another car. In July, it was 42%. It dipped down a little bit last month, but on a new car, it's been in the mid 40s. So I think in terms of a benchmark or an expectation for your dealerships, it's possible to have 55% of your sales have a trade. We see dealerships like that all the time. Remember, this is an average. So there's some dealerships that are 70%, there's some dealerships that are 20%, but by and large, it's ultra important to have trade-ins, and I'm gonna show you why in future slides. So when a car comes in on trade, we're seeing the lowest odometers that we've seen really on the last 3-4 years. They're on average 75,000 miles. And the ACV average right now is about 18.5. ACVs have plateaued. So over this last 4 months, we've seen them kind of ricocheting back and forth around 18 grand, but they're not really moving too far up or down. The odometer is obviously depressed because people haven't been driving their cars. So that you'll notice there's a mirror effect, right? So as the odometer goes down, the ACV goes up, and that's just because cars with less miles are worth more. But also the big ACV increase is obviously just the used car market in general. But this is something that is, a key staple that's going to continue. And I'm going to kind of show what the ripple effects of that and why this is something that won't really change that too often. So the prices of cars that dealerships are selling and the average odometer of these cars is also something else that's very interesting. So prices have also kind of plateaued these last 4 or 5 weeks. We're seeing the odometer starting to kind of also plateau. The average odometer on cars being sold at dealerships has been just going up. And so generally what this means, even despite the fact that the trade-in odometer is going down, cars being sold have an odometer that's going up, means that wholesale auction, wholesale pieces that are coming in have a higher odometer than normal. And obviously it's just like everything else, right? There's less good things left. Therefore, the average mileage is going up. This is also largely due to the fact that, there's less new inventory in the supply that would reset the shop clock effectively. So again, this kind of continues to be the obvious trend, and I think everybody understands the mechanics behind it. So we look at the average number of new arrivals for both new and pre-owned into a dealership. every month. And we look at the ratio between these. So the blue represents the number of used cars that on average came into a dealer's inventory. And then orange represents the new. And then I've overlaid the average days of sale because those are also a big factor, right? So last month, there was 110 used and 65 new that came in. That was the highest ratio at 1.69 to 1 that we've seen all year. May, it was 1.52 to 1, but that ratio obviously is not a healthy ratio. The normal ratio is about 1 to 1. So in normal times, maybe a really aggressive used car dealer that has a lot of supply may get to 1.2, 1.3, but 1.1 is traditionally what we see with dealerships that obviously follow a pretty quick cycle time. So this has had some impact on website traffic. We've seen website traffic just generally since November, just every month it's gone up. And some of this is, due to dealerships and just having a little bit more aggressive marketing over the past 6, 7, 8 months, but it's the demand. I mean, the demand for cars is just unbelievable. And we're seeing this in every marketing engagement metric, traffic metric. We're just generally seeing peak demand for inventory. Customers are coming back to dealership websites and shopping multiple websites more often. So early on, we saw bounce rates kind of go up. They've stabled, but generally, we've never seen this level of traffic to dealerships' websites. And when we look at the bounce rate, we saw kind of in June, we saw bounce rate just across all channels go up. When we see bounce rate go up across every channel simultaneously, that means it's not the channel, it's just the underlying dynamics of the industry. And so inventory being a big driver of that, the demand plus the inventory, and just again, customers not finding the exact new car they wanted, it's kind of leveled off from a bounce rate perspective. And we see just kind of across the board a pretty stable bounce rate. Now, when you look at traffic and where traffic is coming from, we're seeing big increases in direct and organic traffic to dealerships. Part of this is kind of influenced by us rolling out OTT and streaming into our own media mix for our dealerships. So when we do that, direct and organic goes up, and that's pretty common. But this is the greatest indicator of demand that we see kind of, again, when we look at traffic, organic and direct are better indicators of demand than, say, other paid sources. So if you're using a paid source that's starting kind of in the funnel and customers are coming back and doing brand related searches later, obviously that's for a reason. So we want to see organic and direct. That's kind of our indicator of demand from a website perspective. When we look at leads over these past, really 5-6 months has just been the highest of all time. And, there's a problem with this because if we have fewer new cars, but we have more leads, typically what's happening, and I'm sure most dealerships know this, there'll be more than one lead on one vehicle. In some cases, 10, 15, 20 leads on one vehicle. You can only sell that car one time. So the challenge becomes broadening the customer to another option, whether it's pre-owned or another new vehicle that is available to sell. But lead volume has just been, the highest, and this disproportionately is on internet and phone. So we're seeing, on average, dealerships are getting about 150 internet leads, about 70 phone, and 32 showroom leads more this year versus last year. So a significant increase. But prior to March, there were typically about 55 more showroom visits per month in phone ups, and that just hasn't happened. So showroom traffic has not exceeded phone traffic any month since August of last year. And so I want to say that again, for 13 months in a row, phone leads have exceeded showroom traffic, and it's not really close. So we're seeing that gap pretty consistent. And I think there's a big reason, obviously, with consumer behavior, and, obviously COVID's a factor, but definitely we're seeing this pretty consistent across all dealerships. When you think about, okay, there's more leads, less cars, closing rate is what is really kind of the sacrificial lamb here. And it has been. So closing rates have just fallen on new cars from the mid 20s all the way down to now 16%. Obviously, dealerships are filtering for the best customer that has the best trade, that's in close proximity and has the highest gross profit potential. But generally speaking, this is like definitely a concern going forward with the tactics and management of leads and how leads are managed inside of dealerships. And we can kind of see that from a behavioral indicator of appointment set rates. So appointment set rates hit 26% in April last year when dealerships were closed for obvious reasons. This month, it's at 27%. So, and again, you know, we're just not even trying to call a lot of leads, because if we sell the car and there's 10 other leads, we're just kind of, in some cases, dealerships are ignoring the other 9. And so that's what's really causing this kind of deflation of appointment rates. And we're seeing this across the board, but definitely something they're paying attention to. This is a long trailing kind of behavioral tactic or behavioral concern. And you know, we're definitely creating bad habits, and something to get ahead of and instill proper protocol. So when you kind of boil this down to sales have been, you know, obviously really good first part of this year, tapered off a little bit last 2 months just based on inventory. Sales are up versus last year, up versus 19, with new outpacing used in terms of where they're up. The big story obviously is in gross profit in dealerships. So on average, the average dealership in variable gross is up $1 million versus last year. So that's an average of $132,000 in variable gross per month. When you look at that versus 2019, that's an average of $147,000 increase. So this is significant. And obviously it's changed the entire tactics of dealerships and how they operate. When you think about like, where is this coming? Is this new versus used? It's both. It's been more new lately. Used, we saw kind of this double bubble of gross profit where it first kind of increased in June, July of last year, tapered off, and it's kind of built back up. But for the first time since we've been tracking it, both new and used are above 4,000. And so over the last 90 days, the new car gross average is 4,100, and for used, it is 4,231. And there are dealerships within the population that are, you know, 5, 6, 7,000 on average as well. So there's also some that are still averaging 2,300, 2,200. So we're seeing some on the kind of outskirts, but the vast majority are around that center mass of about 4,000, have been for the last 3-4 months. So looking at kind of the payment data, we're seeing APR is still very low. We're seeing the average down payment is at about 2,000 right now over the last 4 months. Customers have a lot of cash in the car deal, and we're going to talk about equity in a minute, but the average new car payment is at 609. And when we look at used, the average used car payment is at 536. So APR has again really been low. Average down payment on the used vehicle is 1,700 as well. We are seeing obviously terms at 84 months all the time, and that's just to absorb the high price of the car. But customers are putting money down, and that's a healthy signal. Warranty penetration on used cars is at 57%. This correlates to odometer at about 76 percentile. So as the average odometer goes up, so does the average warranty penetration. And it's super important for dealerships to reset expectations within their teams of what an effective warranty penetration is. Because the standards are obviously much different. With cars having more miles, we need to protect customers, and we need to make sure that NF&I warranties are being sold way more often than they were previously. So when you think about like, where is all this gross profit coming from? It has nothing, supply and demand is a factor, but the primary driver is equity. And so, and this is new. So when you compare the average ACV versus the average payoff, that gap, the delta between those is equity. So the average ACV is 18.6. The average payoff is about 13.4. So therein lies the equity. And so again, consider the average deposit is up. People are putting more money down on cars. They have trades that are worth about $5,000 more than the payoff right now. And that is what is driving all this gross profit. So when we look at trade equity over time, from January 2020, it was essentially zero. It is now at 5,000, and this is going to be here for a long time. So payments, the bank payoffs don't appreciate people unless they don't pay it off, unless they're not making the payments, right? So people are going to continue to have their payoff go down while these ACVs continue to be strong, if not appreciate. And so this is what's driving all the gross profit in dealerships. This is what is, the biggest reason why dealerships are so successful financially. And again, the payoffs aren't going to move like the ACV, and the ACV is going to be high for a while, just given how few new cars they're making. And so we're going to see this really throughout the rest of the year into next year. And I think dealerships are remodeling, like how are they going to look at compensation and structures within their teams, because it's significant. When you kind of look at the service side, it's has some massive ripple effects. Obviously, if everybody is buying used cars and the average odometer is increasing, we definitely are seeing an increase in traffic. And we've seen this across all types. There's a huge spike for internals at the beginning of the year, but customer pay is pre-COVID levels right now. Dealerships have never been busier in service, and we're seeing this in every metric possible. Effective labor rates have gone up across the board as dealerships aren't discounting labor, and they're doing this with no team. So the average dealership number of technicians right now is not at pre-COVID levels. So we're still missing out about 10% service capacity just by being understaffed, on average, one full tech. And so this problem of not having enough techs and the capacity issues, again, it's going to persist until there's a way in which we can recruit, develop, and retain technicians quicker. The general principle that we see is that this is the golden era of service and will be for the next 5 to 10 years. And so service departments thinking bigger, that really needs to be the mindset in terms of what you've done is okay, but there's so much more. And the independent service providers are so aggressive right now. So this kind of, again, remains a huge opportunity. When you look at gross profit, the average in service, dealerships on average are up about $826,000 in gross profit versus last year. So again, if you remembered the total from the prior slide for sales plus service, it's 1.8 million in between fixed and variable gross is the increase versus last year. And the big driver for this is the volume's up, but the gross profit per repair order is up across the board for customer pay, internal, and warranty. So when people keep their car longer, they need bigger repair items. And obviously that's why gross profit's up. Also, dealerships are charging a little bit more and they're not discounting labor. So those are other reasons. So from an ad spend perspective, we're seeing cost per clicks across Facebook and Google to be very consistent. This light blue line spike that you see here is due to the election. So there was, hundreds of millions of dollars were being spent in Facebook advertising across all the kind of parties and PACs. That rose, that increased the cost per thousand impressions dramatically. As soon as January hit, basically somewhere in about December, actually, it slammed all the way down, and it's been generally pretty consistent. We've seen it tip up a little bit in these last few months, but again, nothing like the level that we saw last year. So in terms of there's been some changes with Apple and iOS 14.5. We integrate our first-party data within both of these platforms, and we're able to measure our match rates with both of these platforms. So on DMS data for both sales and service data, we're in the about 88% match rate and 75% match rate on CRM data. So we integrate the first-party data into audiences that are used in both Facebook, they call it custom audiences, Google calls it customer match, and we integrate those dynamically. And we're also looking at inspecting on the record level how we're doing in terms of matching. And there's a big change in April where we had to go through a number of steps to verify and submit different kind of audience updates. We did those in about a week, and you saw the recovery here. So really, we're kind of back to business as normal on the audience front. And this is, again, something that we have worked on for 3-4 years. We've been doing audience-based integrations with these platforms. So something that for us was pretty easy to be nimble. When we kind of look at like, what does this mean for dealerships and what's happening? Well, if everybody is buying, used cars, what happens to sales loyalty? This was really the key question that hit us. And so about last month, mid-month, we were asking ourselves, this exact question: what were the ripple effects? And the thing that was obvious to me, and something that you just learned, is that the loyalty, the inherent loyalty when somebody buys a new car is higher than a used car. And so if we change the ratio of how many cars we're selling new to used, what happens to loyalty was the question. So we have the ability to measure this, and we did. And sure enough, we found that sales loyalty has been dropping. And it's been dropping way faster this year than at any time than we have data back. We have data back to about 2012. And we looked at this, and the average new car customer in 2019 was coming back to a dealership about 22, 23% of the time. That's now 12% of the time. And for used, it was 10%, 10.4, and it's now 4.9. And so this really shook us to our core, and we thought about what can we do and how does this impact dealerships and where are customers going and why is this happening, right? Those are all the kind of questions. The other question was what's happening for service. And so when we thought about this for service, we're like, well, dealerships are at capacity. We know how busy they are. We're seeing it in their data. What does that mean for the customers that are trying to schedule an appointment but can't? They're obviously going elsewhere. And sure enough, for service, the story was also true. So although service increased from 2019 well into this year, from May of this year, when dealerships really started hitting peak service, to now, it's dropped a full 4%. And it's done this in 4 months. And that just hasn't happened previously. So we're seeing, because dealerships are at full capacity right now, customers just can't fit in prior customers. And so we're seeing the fastest degradation or defection of sales and service loyalty that we've ever measured. And it's all obvious, right? These aren't you don't have to, have even these stats to connect the dots. You can figure it out. Well, if service is too busy, customers are going to go elsewhere. If we're not selling new cars, there's less loyalty in used cars, therefore loyalty is going to go down. And, that's pretty common sense. It doesn't take this much math, but we wanted to prove it. And I'm pretty sure we've done so. And so the question then became for us, what are we going to do about this? And how do we help dealerships across the country support in this effort? And we came up over the last month, we've come up with a number of options for dealerships and a number of recommendations. And that's really what this last part's going to be about. And to start, we asked ourselves, we have to retain and defend, because if, we're trying to protect, we have to do that, but we also have to save money at the same time. And we want to do that through suppression. So we thought about how do we deploy audiences at scale and help dealerships retain, defend, and also suppress so that they can save money. And it really kind of comes down to these two core functions that we think, right? So when you break it down, your customer data is hosted by us. We do this completely anonymously with sending of PII through in a hashed way through marketing channels like Facebook and Google. So none of the PII actually gets sent. We sent a code that essentially represents the PII. And we do this in a way that happens automatically. But this customer data that we integrate with all DMS providers, so it's whether it's Techion or CDK, Reynolds, doesn't matter. We integrate with all of them. We host it in a secure Microsoft environment, and then we can use this data to support one of three options. So we can work with your existing marketing partner, we can work with your internal teams, or if you choose to, you can work directly with us, but you don't have to. So this was new. We haven't done this since about 2018. We haven't shared our audiences with external teams. So for the first time in about 3 years, we're opening up our technology to other partners. So if you have an existing marketing partner, you don't need to switch to us to take advantage of these audiences. We can directly integrate these audiences right into the ad accounts of both Google and Facebook that your marketing team is already using. If you prefer to use us, we can do that as well, but you don't have to. If you have an internal marketing team or you're part of an auto group that has built over 5 years this really impressive internal marketing team and you're doing a bunch of your advertising in-house, perfect. We can automatically syndicate all these audiences to you without you having to manually do it. And there's a huge advantage for the way that we've done this. One, we've invested millions and millions of dollars into this technology. So we just have a huge advantage in terms of how we focused on this. And we combine all of the best information from the lead data, the sales data, the service data to enhance that match probability. And that's why we get those 88% match rates that traditionally, if you're going to do this on your own, you're going to be way off that. Also, if you're going to do this across all the audiences every day for both Google and Facebook, you're looking at something like 200 manual exports and imports over the course of a month. And that's just on a few audiences. So it's a huge undertaking to manage this, and we just make it effortless. And we figured if we're doing this for ourselves and dealerships are in this situation with loyalty, it's time that we do our part and offer this up in an open way. So going a little bit further into the details, protecting against customer defection, this really is something that we're going to talk specifically about how we do this, and then specifically how we reduce advertising waste. So on both of these fronts, these are clear and present risks that we see in dealerships. The first thing is obviously somebody in a database that you have in both Facebook and Google allows you to change the rules for that marketing, and it allows you to tip the balance back in your favor. Also, when somebody's already bought a car or has recently visited service, it's time to stop advertising them. The last thing you want is somebody that is just serviced a car 3 days ago, searching for your dealership, clicking a paid ad, charging you $3. And so that's just dumb. And if you think about how busy dealerships are, if you have 1,000 repair orders in a month and people are picking up and dropping off cars, there's up to about 1,500, 2,000 times that they're going to potentially, click on a branded paid search ad for your dealership. And no one solved this before. No one has dynamically done suppression, and dealerships have been wasting thousands of dollars every month on this for as long as paid search has been around. And so this is something that we've been doing since 2019, and we felt it was necessary to offer this as well as the ability to protect from defection. So talking again a little bit more detailed on the audiences specifically, there's 3 primary categories of first-party audiences. So CRM, DMS sales, and DMS service. And for partnerships with external teams or internal teams, we're providing you these audiences. Driven Data has a few more that we use that predict when people are in market and things like that. But for the purposes of protecting your database from defecting and suppressing transactions, these are the most critical audiences that we can support any dealership with any situation across the country. And so every night, these all update. It happens, again, automatically, and you just go into the ad account and you can connect these to campaigns. So across these 3 types, again, works very simply. So I want to talk about defection and what that means. We're calling this loyalty lock. And essentially what you want to do and why this makes sense, you got to think about it from the standpoint of somebody in your database that's done business with you before is searching for either a competitor, a company like Carvana, Car Gurus, where Auto Trader, a classified site, an independent service provider like Jiffy Lube. Normally, you wouldn't bid on all of these names, right? You wouldn't bid on Carvana because it would just get too expensive and it would be a waste. But if somebody's in your database and they search for Carvana, that's different. And so that is what we recommend we do, or your, again, internal or external teams. This hasn't been done before. And so we're rolling this out across all of Driven Data customers as we speak. And it's something we're really excited about because we're seeing really good early results from this strategy. We've been using this in a slightly different way since May of last year, with doing advanced bid modifiers if somebody's in a database. And again, we think about these 4 core sections, Carvana, CarMax, of the like. Carvana sold the same number of cars this year, halfway through the year, that they did last year. Every customer they're selling a car to has never done business with them. And so they're acquiring customers and spending more money in advertising than we've ever seen. And CarMax is essentially doing the same. I just read that Carvana's average gross profit is $5,100 per unit. And so that huge increase of volume, they're just rolling that back into customer acquisition. And I think now they added 27 new locations this year. So this is a real imminent issue. And customers, if they're buying used cars, again, we're seeing a huge interest in Carvana from all the advertising, and it's obviously very anti-dealer advertising. So this is something that we want to protect. If they're in your database, they search for these keywords, or they search for an independent service provider, we want to intercept that, run a paid ad, and keep the customer before they defect. And this is just a smarter way of doing it than spending direct mail to every customer every month saying, reminding them how much you love them. Doing it this way, it's the most timely, the most precise way possible. And we could not come up with a better use of audiences in marketing. To protect a customer at the moment they're considering defecting is probably the most impactful. And so that really kind of covers the core structure of our defection technology and how this can work for internal, external teams. In terms of Facebook advertising, this is more of something that you can do actively. So you can actively market towards your database. So that really concludes my overview of the state of the industry, the state of the metrics, and what we're doing to prevent this loyalty defection that we're seeing. And so without further ado, I can turn it back to Brooke and Zach.
Thanks, John. Much appreciated. We do have a couple questions before we transition to Mike DeCecco, our Director of Partnerships and Product. One of the questions is regarding, if we're wasting $1,700 a month, what does the service cost and what is the net gain? So I'm assuming we're talking about suppression here in terms of what we're wasting. On the higher end, with more of the metro dealers that sell significant amounts of cars, it is generally higher than that, actually. On the smaller end, for smaller points selling sub 75 cars per month, it's lower than that. In terms of the service cost, if you want to retain your existing marketing provider, we will send the audiences plus give you access to analytics for $6.99 per month. The next question in the fold here is about the used car market. So John, to your best knowledge, it's a two-part question here. When do you think the used car market will fall off a cliff, or do you think it will fall off a cliff? And when should we expect prices to normalize?
So it's not going to fall off a cliff for a bunch of really complicated reasons. The most obvious being the supply chain of chips is going to lurch and creep back. They can't flood the cars back because there's so much global competition for these chips. As dealers know on the call, brands are doing recalls, getting donor chips off of cars to then install in other vehicles. So they're using techniques that are kind of way out in the kind of realm of, something you'd never believe. And the best indicator we have is new car production, right? So new car production figures are going to drive all of this. The thing to remember, though, is all of the fleet business has held their breath as well. They've been buying used cars. So all of these cars, the average age and the average odometer has gone up so fast that even if new cars come back into production, say in a real way, say mid-year next year, there's still so many people that need new cars that it's going to take a long time, and you're going to have plenty of time to see that happening over months, where it's not going to be this all at once blast. And I look at the new car supply numbers. I look at what the manufacturers are doing in their production figures, and that's really the best indication.
Great, thanks, John. All right, well, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Mike DeCecco. Mike's going to start reviewing the partnership opportunities.
Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Mike. I see some familiar names in the attendees, so that's always great to see folks paying attention to what we're doing. We're doing some really cool stuff. Thanks, John, for everything that you put together. A little bit of an Oracle lesson there. The cool part about this is that a lot of the visibility that John shared, we can give to individual dealerships and dealership groups alike. So you can kind of see how individual stores are performing against one another. If you work with a group, the way that we structure our partnerships, we're very open when it comes to this. As John mentioned, this is something we're really focused on, kind of making sure that we're part of the solution to this defection problem. So something that we're really interested in talking to you guys about is, tell us about what you're doing right now. How can we help you integrate some of these audiences into your current processes so that you can start to plug this defection hole that's happening around the industry? Working with us is it's really easy. We've got some simple steps to get some of these audiences integrated. We contract with dealers because of the sensitive nature of the data that we're pulling. However, we are structuring all kinds of different agreements based on the different needs of the dealer and the agencies and how those relationships. We understand there's dynamics there, so we're structuring some really interesting deals to make sure that everybody gets what they need out of it. And the most important thing is that the dealer's getting what they need out of this, which is a way to really make sure that these customers aren't leaving their database en masse like we're currently seeing right now. So it's an important problem. It's one of those problems you can only see when you have all of this data connected. And that's why I think we're all so excited at Driven Data about what we've done, is because we've got this lens to be able to provide this information that really nobody's really talked about to this point. And it was only possible by pulling all of this data together in one spot across all of the dealership's technology solutions. So you can reach out to me. My email is here. I know Brooke is going to follow up with some materials after the webinar is over, that of course you can get in touch through that as well. But feel free to give me a ring. I can talk to you about how we do this, what it's like to work with us. It's pretty simple and straightforward. But it's time now to start thinking about protecting those databases, given everything we've just seen. So that's my piece. We're really looking forward to talking to you guys.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mike. All right. We've got a couple more questions in here. We've got a little bit of time left, so let's proceed with a couple more of these questions. All right. One of the questions is, where do you think the digital retailing market is going? Do you think customers are engaging with DR applications, and how can we make them better?
Yeah, so it's really been a very interesting dynamic. So obviously last year, February, March, everybody rushes to implement digital retailing into dealerships. Every dealership has to have this effectively. Then as you kind of get into the end of the year, really beginning of this year, about February, March, dealers start pausing digital retailing. At the same time, CarMax and Carvana go all in, as do most of the large publicly traded automotive groups, offering bespoke solutions specific to catering as dealerships kind of regress. That has created, for them, they're using that as a method of acquisition. For dealerships that are kind of hemming and hawing back and forth, I know why, right? So you make more gross profit, obviously, by kind of not sharing the payment data to customers. What's interesting is that Carvana and CarMax are making gross profit. So Carvana's average gross profit is $5,100, and they're doing digital retailing. So it's possible to have your cake and eat it too on this front and have a really effective customer experience when customers are going to those places because they think the experience is going to be different and better. So I think it's important not to, remove that entirely, because that's just kind of what's causing that allure to begin with. And so I think if there's a time where, dealerships have to really get serious about it, because that's the primary value proposition that they're selling.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Another question is, I'll take this one as an answer. The question is, what's included in your analytics suite and how long does it take to set up? Our analytics suite is comprised of the greatest hits of reports from your DMS, CRM, inventory management applications, and marketing data. We standardize the data, which is crucial and important. So including the analytics suite, you'll see how you compare against dealers inside of your group. In addition to that, how you compare against our universal benchmarks nationwide. So from a simple landscape, you can see everything all on one page. Gone are the days of you getting retroactive 30, 60, 90-day old reports and making decisions on them in the future. We want to enable our dealers that actively work with us to make forward-thinking discussions and future decisions based on insights delivered in the dashboard. For example, if you click on our performance tab, one of the main questions that we get every single month on behalf of the dealers that we are doing marketing for is, what should my budget be? And so we take a unique approach to recommending budgets or advertising budgets for dealerships across the nation by backing in their operational sales data and showing them the budget that it will take based on their visitor to close percentages, based on their close rates online, and based on their showroom traffic, and also based on their average marketing cost to attribute a recommended spend. Now, our customer success team actively works with dealers to refine that spend based on the channels that we're seeing most effective for their area. The whole goal with the dashboards, again, is to be a bit more prescriptive. If you've ever used Google Maps or Waze, those are prescriptive analytics applications. If there is traffic ahead, we are potentially offering up a reroute for the dealerships based on the insights driven and also based on operational revenue sources. So what does that mean? If you're looking at the screen right now, you can see some of the green numbers in the boxes that are located in the center. These indicate the increase in profit or revenue that the dealership could have should they meet the benchmarks we're associating with at a universal landscape. All right, I think we've got one more question in here. All right, the question is, when do you see new car inventory rebounding and what should we do about it now from a marketing perspective? John, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so new car inventory rebounding is complicated, right? So on some of these vehicles, they need 1920 chips. Ford is talking about obviously delivering trucks to dealerships without the chips to be installed. We're likely going to see some of the order a car and have kind of your cake and eat it too with like an equity lock. I think that's likely going to come from the OEMs as they try to get a little spicy with advertising to try to differentiate themselves. But no, it's going to be like this on the new car side for a minute. So I think looking at this from the standpoint of how do you protect what you've built, the average dealership that works with us and from an audience perspective has 100,000 customers in their database, 100,000. And every dealership that doesn't have new cars, right, which is everybody, is looking at these customers saying, how do I retain you? And so when I think of the strategy being on service, on retention, on used cars and new cars where you can, that really to me is the foundation for success.
Awesome. Thanks, John. There is one more question before we turn it back over to Brooke to put a bow on this. The question is, our service techs are low right now and it's tough to find new service techs. Should we consider opening up hours or making things more accessible on our website for customers to book?
Yeah, so I definitely think that extending service hours is a complicated choice. And I think when you talk to internal service teams, and we have the kind of data and analytics to kind of help guide where the trends are and what likely is the right path. You can look at the arrival patterns of when the RO open time occurs to understand like when would be the first time that you'd want to experiment with opening service hours. And we can help with that. The challenge that I see with this is that most dealerships have additional capacity without hiring additional techs. And whether that number is 20% or 50%, I think that's different for every dealership. But extending hours generally causes a ton of chaos, so moving techs to 4x10s and having kind of a staggering schedule is probably the first thing that you would look at if you're going to do something like that. But every time I've done it in the past, it's been brutally difficult in the near term, but beneficial in the long run. I think now looking at it kind of honestly, service is going to be very stout for a while. So thinking bigger in service, I think I would encourage that just generally.
Great. Well, thanks, John, and thanks, Mike. I want to thank the folks who got a chance to attend today, and I will turn it over to Brooke.
All right. Well, thank you guys, everyone, for joining us today. As Mike mentioned earlier, I'll be sending out a follow-up email that will have my contact info in it as well as Mike's. So if you have any questions at all, we're happy to answer them. This webinar was also recorded today, so I will also be attaching the link so you guys can rewatch the recording or share it with anyone that you would like. So thanks everyone again for coming, and it was great to see everyone.